Um, hey, David K. Johnston, it's one of these situations in which it really is true. They have flooded the zone, and it's hard to know where to start.
Yeah.
I want to start with something that involves a revelation about Kash Patel and the confirmation process. He lied to Congress again during the confirmation process. I think there is some of that, maybe a lot of that. We saw, more than the daily recommended dose of lies associated with all of these candidates for positions in the Trump administration. But Kash Patel's nomination for FBI director was something that was already controversial, and now Dick Durbin is accusing him of having lied directly about the bureau firings, the purge at the FBI, and whether or not he was behind it. Just before I get David's comment, Albert, can you play a little bit of that Dick Durbin thing? Now, Dick Durbin, I just want to say his manner of speaking, David, you and I talk about this, that, Democrats need better messengers. They just, Durbin is, this, what's the word? Somnambulistic or whatever, something that he induces sleep almost in his style. Do you have it, Albert? I'm stalling right now so you can get it. Okay, all right. Here he is. This is Dick Durbin talking about Kash Patel. And again, pardon his manner, but listen to what he's saying.
At the highest levels will give my Republican colleagues some pause before it's too late. Multiple whistleblowers have disclosed to my staff highly credible information indicating that Mr. Kash Patel has been personally directing the ongoing purge of senior law enforcement officials at the FBI. Let me remind you, Mr. President, Mr. Patel at this moment in time is not on any public payroll, nor does he have any authority by our government. Listen, on the morning of January 29th, the day before Kash Patel's confirmation hearing, there was a meeting between the acting leadership of the Department of Justice and the FBI. Notes from that morning meeting read, KP wants movement at FBI, reciprocal actions for DOJ. Let me say that again, quote, notes from the meeting, KP wants movement at FBI, reciprocal actions for DOJ. Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove told the participants in this meeting that he had received multiple calls from the White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller the night before. Miller had pressured him because Kash Patel, KP, wanted the FBI to remove targeted officials faster, as DOJ had already done with prosecutors. The list of officials identified for termination was in the possession of a group of individuals who, according to our sources, were personally interviewed by Mr. Patel to be on what was known as the Director's Advisory Team. This advisory team at the FBI is a group of political appointees who were brought in to prepare for Mr. Patel's arrival. FBI leadership understanding of the advisory team's list was that, quote, a lot of names were people in the crosshairs.
Okay, so let's just stop there. You get the idea. Essentially, Patel, when asked if he had anything to do with the purge, said no, he's had nothing to do. And of course, as we've learned, he had everything to do with it.
Well, you have a group of people who are criminals in their mindset now in charge of the major institutions of our government. Pam Bondi is as corrupt as it gets. She took $25,000 from a charity for her campaign for Attorney General years ago, shut down an investigation of Donald Trump's fraudulent Trump University, and her people defended taking money from a charity, which is a wrongful act. Kash Patel was on the payroll of a Kremlin-connected outfit that paid him $25,000. So you're dealing with people to whom power matters, not integrity, not principle, just power. And you're going to see a whole lot of valued federal agents forced out of the FBI by Kash Patel because they're not going to be personally loyal to Donald Trump. And of course, you're supposed to be loyal to the Constitution, not to any person. But this is not a government of law. This is a government of men, or a single man in this case. And the goal here is very clear. It is to create an unaccountable presidency a dictator. And I've been telling people now for almost 10 years, Donald wants to be our dictator. And with what's happening in front of your eyes, I don't understand that people don't see that. And if you think, well, you know what, I'm going to be okay. I'm a white male, wealthy Republican. Two warnings to you. One is sooner rather than later, authoritarian leaders turn on the true believers because they're a danger to them. There's plenty of history of this under dictators all around the world. Authoritarian scholars like Sarah Kendzior and Timothy Snyder at Yale have written about this. There's have a number of other lesser known people in these fields. And the second is, no, somebody may not come for you, but they're going to come for people around you that may be very damaging to your interests. But, you know, I have a piece at DC Report. It was the lead story yesterday when I was traveling to Washington, but it's not still on the front page today. And it's about how it appears that the large percentage of the American public is like, oh, well, nothing we can do. And they're going to let us slide into a dictatorship. And, you know, this is an amazing development, Mark. You know who we're depending on for our liberties? Lawyers. It's the attorneys general and the lawyers for fired inspectors general and other people. We're depending on them. What an astonishing turn that all of us are having to depend on lawyers for our liberties. And at the same time, we're seeing the richest man in the world taking part in literally killing some of the poorest people in the world. There's now at least one confirmed death from AID, the Agency for National Development, not having money to maintain hospitals. They're closing hospitals that were sponsored by AID. There's food that's not being delivered. So we will soon have children who died of starvation. All of these things are happening. And it's the richest man in the world going after the poorest people in the world. I mean, that is such a literary arc. You would think people would get it. But no, you know, go to any of the conservative websites and this is further cleaning out the rot and corruption. And when Elon Musk says somebody at Social Security is 150 years old and they're getting their check, well, okay, who are they? Name them. That you can't libel or harm a dead person.
Thank you.
And so let's see the evidence that you have. Donald says, "Oh, we're fighting corruption everywhere." Donald's been saying garbage like that his whole life when there's nothing there.
They've shown no math at all on any of this stuff. They make these sweeping claims. You mentioned his comments. Albert, play a little bit, if you would, of Elon Musk and Donald Trump addressing the media from the Oval Office. First of all, David, it's an extraordinary thing that, you know, from the Oval Office, you have this guy who, and, you know, you and I agreed that Doge was sort of this, it had no formal setup. It was given no formal power. We thought that at best that he'd make recommendations and Congress would have to act on them or whatever, that he was essentially given a ceremonial position because of all the money he'd, boy, were we ever wrong. This guy is really, you know, taking a wrecking ball to government. So this same guy is now addressing the press with the agenda items that this administration is all about. Go ahead, Albert, please.
Questions. Elon, go ahead.
Sure. So the at a high level, you say, what is the goal of Doge and I think a significant part of the presidency is to restore democracy. This may seem like, well, are we in a democracy? Well, if you don't have a feedback loop, okay, we'd have to, if you sorry. So tell you gravitas can be difficult sometimes.
By the way, the cuteness, stop for a second. We break this down, which we can do during our conversation with David. And but go ahead, David.
Well,
the cuteness masks a lot, you know.
It does, but notice something very significant in this very short clip. Donald has no use for children. His own oldest three children, who now, two of them, his sons, are still dependent on him, and Ivanka, who was until she married Jared, and they used the White House to get billions of dollars of money to invest where they get fees from it. They all said after Donald left his first wife, they wanted nothing to do with him. He was a terrible father. I think I've mentioned on your show in the past the incident when Tiffany was born to Marla Maples, that they were for a photo shoot and she needed to adjust her top before the next shoot. And she tried to hand baby Tiffany to Donald, who went back, jumped back and said, "What are you doing?" I mean, the man's never changed a diaper in his life. He couldn't imagine doing that. So this little 4-year-old goes over toward him and he pulls away. Who does that with a little child? Donald Trump. The rest of us would be like, pat him on the head or maybe even pick him up and put him on your lap. But you don't do what Donald did, pull away like that.
Well, David, what the kids said, we have that on a video. Do you want to just give it to, should we drop it on?
Yeah.
I was going to, let's just right now, this is a little digression. I wanted to get kind of into policy, but let me just play for you. It's been isolated in a couple of places, and I just grabbed it off of one spot, somebody who broke it down. But Albert, play for David K. Johnston and for everyone what he was actually saying. It starts about 55 seconds into this cut. If you don't have it, you'll have to go 55 seconds into this offering, and you'll see this breakdown. Again, I just grabbed this, so it's right off of social media. And this is what the kid actually said. Here you go.
And there was a hot mic that caught some of it. So first is this little gem.
To restore democracy. This may seem like, well,
You heard that too, right? You're not the president. You need to go away. I'll play the clip a second time. Just you watch and tell me if that's what he said.
to restore democracy. This may seem like,
That's what he said, but I'll go one better because he also said this.
The prices from one year to the next are the same, and the mortgage go.
That one's clear as day. He says, "I want you to shut your fucking mouth up." And there's already people who are like, "Out of the mouth of babes." But let me just put this out there for your consideration. A child this young doesn't have this profound moment where he tells off Trump. He just repeats things he's heard.
Okay,
So
that's
says
good,
you're not really
Albert. I just wanted
chances are-
Yeah.
it is weird that the kid, he's got a pretty hard edge when it comes to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I don't think any of my 8 children at the age of 4 spoke like that. They may now, but not at the age of 4. But let me point out something here. Elon Musk, as Lawrence O'Donnell pointed out last night, interrupted Donald Trump. Now, reporters shout questions and maybe interrupting a president, but I've never seen anybody interrupt a president of the United States. The opening episode of The West Wing has this great closer where Martin Sheen, as president, comes into the room. And one of the things he says, and by the way, when the president of the United States walks into a room, nobody sits down. And this woman stands up. But there's something else I think that was revealed in this, not in the words, but in the body language, in Donald's not going after Elon Musk when Time magazine very provocatively put him behind the Resolute desk on its cover as if he's president. And he I think in many ways is the de facto president. Donald is facing a more than $500 million obligation in the New York State civil case, which he can't stop as president. The court in the Jennifer Flowers case with Bill Clinton made it very clear presidents are still subject to civil actions. And $88 million with interest that's close to $100 million by now in the E. Jean Carroll cases. Donald may well be in hock to Elon in some fashion. It is not Donald's style to let anyone outshine him. At the first time he went to I think it was a G20 meeting, there's a video of him pushing the president of tiny Montenegro out of the way so he could be in the front on the video. And this is just extraordinary that, Donald is bowing down to this younger man. Now, some people have said, well, he thinks of him as having another son. I don't think so. I think this is somehow tied up with Donald's finances, which are always smoke and mirrors. By the way, are you getting every day, as I am, more and more pitches, for money?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's selling, he wants you to buy a coffee cup and a jacket and all sorts of stuff.
He's cranked up the merch for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And have you ever seen any president do this? No, of course you haven't.
You don't remember the Obama coffee cups? So David, you've really actually this is a breakthrough for me because it was sitting there right in front of my face. I was wondering how Trump could so willingly just hand over everything to Musk, and the limelight mostly, as you
Right.
said over and over. I mean, Trump's in it for ego as much as everything else. He likes being the most powerful man on earth. And he likes those flexes, like when the press is there to talk to him. And the fact that he would surrender the mic, it speaks to the fact that he is in hock on some level, to the point that Musk may be a rescue for him.
Yeah,
Wow.
and Elon Musk has so much money. I mean, we're talking about $500 billion. At the rate things are going, 4 years from now, I'm sure he'll be a trillionaire unless there's some huge reversal. Money becomes meaningless to him. It is there's so much of it. And look what else he's allowed Musk to do. He said, "Oh, we're going to put controls on Elon so there's no conflicts of interest." Well, the FAA, Aviation Safety, was investigating his space company, and he told the head of the agency, "Resign or Donald will fire you." Even though he's a private citizen at this point, goes right ahead. Even as his position as special employee of the White House, he doesn't have any authority to fire anybody, but these people are quitting, and clearly they're being told things. I presume they're being told, "We're going to sue you. We're going to mess up your life. Leave now, and we won't argue over your pension." Don't trust them for a second on that. He got rid of AID, which was looking into him over Starlink. And there are a couple of other agencies where the same thing has happened. Imagine if Barack Obama had done 1% of what we've seen in the last 3 weeks and one day, the Republicans would have, in fact, impeached him.
Yes.
And you're seeing not just a dictator on the make, but you're seeing a criminal enterprise take over our government. And unfortunately, if you go onto social media, you go to any of the right-wing websites, you will see lots of people going, "Yeah, Donald's doing the right thing. Good for Elon." The richest man in the world is literally killing some of the poorest. And people who call themselves Christians are cheering that on.
It's astounding. And you point so correctly toward the agencies he's effectively closing down. USAID, in his crosshairs is EPA, FAA you mentioned, for just the reasons that you've articulated. I talked earlier in the first hour about CFPB because I see the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as key in regulating Musk, who wants to turn X, as you know, into a financial platform, a kind of PayPal. And the one government agency that would be the cop on the beat, he is now closing down, CFPB.
And let's remember something. This is the agency that Elizabeth Warren thought up. It wasn't exactly the way she wanted it to be, but it's largely what she proposed. She deserves the credit for it. This agency has cost us $1 for each about $6 they've recovered for consumers. I mean, how do you call that anything but a success unless you are a predatory banker? And if you're an honest banker, and that's most of the bankers, you should be cheering on this agency because it doesn't help you to have a lot of corrupt enterprises. So when Wells Fargo Bank created 8 million phony accounts, when they were tricking people with promises like, "Hey, we'll rewrite your mortgage at no cost and lower your interest rate," and then you found out, no, they put $13,000 of fees onto your loan, other banks should have said, "Oh, no, that's not good for us. This will inspire people against banks as a general rule. They're not going to remember, was it our bank or their bank?" And no, you're seeing complete surrender and corruption to this administration. And the reason is that the people who are effectively thugs are going around saying, "Get along, get out, or we will destroy you."
He actually posted on X, RIP, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I mean, these are the same organization, as David is saying, is the one that got the medical debt off of your credit report, because medical debt is wildly inaccurate anyway. So it can destroy your life without even being legit. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, many people with medical debt, what happens is they can't pay. The hospital will sell that debt for 10 cents on the dollar. There are some documented cases of 2 or 3 cents on the dollar. And then they hit you with penalty interest rates, everything else in the world, in an attempt to go after you. Now, we've had a few judges who've said, "No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to let you do that." But Clearly it's a very profitable business, or they wouldn't be in that business. Buying something, and a debt is an asset, just like a house or a factory. Buying something for 2 or 3 cents or even a dime on the dollar should make a lot of profit. But that goes to the core of one of the things they're going after are nonprofits. They want to eliminate nonprofit hospitals and make all of them for profit. The record is quite clear on for-profit hospitals. They provide inferior service. They are not as safe in terms of infectious diseases, which you have to control constantly in a hospital, and other costs. They're going after education. And remember, Donald says, we love the poorly educated. 15% overhead on a federal grant, that's plenty. They have no idea how the system works and why it was designed that if you get a grant, if I were to get one at the Rochester Institute of Technology, the university would get 48% of the money. Why? Well, let's say I'm a medical researcher and I have people, we pay $50 every time they come in every third week for us to stick them with a needle for some drug experiment. We have medical waste we have to get rid of. That doesn't come out of the grant. It's paid for by the university. We have to pay the subjects. That may or may not be covered by the grant. Now, if you want to reform the system, fine, we can make the system operate differently, but that's not what they're doing. They are setting out to destroy the crown jewels of the United States. The FBI, in particular, its counterintelligence, counterterrorism function. The Consumer Finance Protection Board, which has returned so much money to people. The Environmental Protection Agency, vastly fewer people have died in the last 40 years. Well, it's been almost 55 years now since Nixon signed that law, that they're not dying from heart attacks and asthma and cancer because of unsafe water, unsafe air, particulates beyond what's reasonable in the air. And the American higher education system is the absolute marvel of the world. And they don't want to let foreign students come in unless they're from, European and Nordic sort of countries. And all of this is simply burning down the house. That's what they're out to do, because out of the ashes, the way Trump sees it, it makes him even more powerful, never mind who gets hurt. And if you don't have any empathy, if you can't even look at a 4-year-old child, then of course you would have no qualms about doing something like this, because other people only exist as either obstacles like me to what you want to achieve, or they exist as tools to be used like Kash Patel.
The claims that have, I think, effectively captured at least a bit of the narrative on the right, like a Fox News Channel type narrative, is that Elon Musk, wow, we're so lucky to have found him. I mean, Lord and Savior Donald Trump found him to help clean up government because of all the waste. Look at all the billions that Elon has pointed to that is wasteful. Of course, there, as you've suggested at the beginning of this conversation, I was mentioning it last hour, they don't show the math. They don't have any real evidence of all this. And there's just sort of this, when he talks about the Social Security fraud, I mean, that's kind of like a trope almost. We understand that, Social Security can be abused, as can unemployment insurance, et cetera. But there's the kind of run amok quality that Elon Musk has. It's oddly something that people in government are tacitly going along with. I'm talking about legislators.
Oh, yeah.
Is that just fear, do you think, David, or is there an agenda there?
No, I think that for many of these folks, it is absolute fear. And I've started referring to, and I do in my DC report piece, to the Republicans as the Quisling party. And if you don't know who a Quisling is, when I was a 4-year-old, I knew the word. By the time I was 6, I understood it. Quisling was the Nazi collaborator in Norway when the Germans came in. There's a wonderful movie out right now called Number 24, I think, about the one of the few survivors of the resistance in Norway. A really, really good movie on, I think, Netflix. Might be on Amazon. I think it's on Netflix. But they're the Quisling party. They're being disloyal to the country, and they're doing so out of cowardice. They don't have any spine. They're not willing to stand up for principles. They just don't want to be beaten in a primary. Well, what a horrible fate. You lost your seat in Congress of the U.S. Senate. We're not sending you to the gulag. If you've been a senator for a while, or a House member, if you can't find good employment after you leave, you probably shouldn't have been in the House in the first place. And yesterday, I spoke with one of the people I went to see. A whole lot of meetings in Washington. One of them was a very senior member of Congress who I know is respected on both sides of the aisle. And I said, what is going on that nobody will stand up to Donald? And he said, oh, they know, most of them know better. He says, some of them know, they don't get it at all. And I said, so what is it? I mean, I want to make sure I have. And he said, oh, they're hoping that the Democrats, will somehow bail them out of this. Something will happen and they won't have to do anything. But the fundamental issue is cowardice. It's just political cowardice. And if you take an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, domestic and foreign, and you're not willing to risk your seat in Congress, you don't belong in a public office.
Boy, that's so well said. I'm going to ask you about something when it comes to Ukraine in a moment, but I just want to put it to the side. Underdog says, it appears that the Republicans aim to privatize all services so that they can profit from them. This is something that we've said for a long time. That really is part of the end game, to privatize everything, right?
Right. And the claims that are always made that privatizing lowers costs, we have limited evidence on what it means. There are some examples where it's worked well, but there are lots of examples where it's led to higher costs down the road. Think about, among other things, that if you privatize, you have to have a return on your capital. That's going to add about 10%. But more importantly, we don't have the data anymore. So years ago in Portland, Oregon, the Oregonian newspaper, was a very good paper under the new houses, ran these stories about how the city water and sewer department was sending out these massive bills. People got $1 million bills for their water service. And because the software they had bought from, I think it was Siemens, the big European computer company, SAP, screwed up. Guess what? Almost all big computer projects have things like that. But they only reported on the government because they had access to the disclosure materials. Well, I happened to be in Oregon at the time. I went down to the state capitol on an investigative project I was doing to the Public Utility Commission, and I found out, digging around in the records there, that the exact same problems were taking place at the Portland Natural Gas Company, called, I think, Northwest Natural Gas. But nobody knew about it because it's a private company. Now, I found it out. It wasn't hard to find out, but you had to know what to look for and go to the records of this obscure agency full of jargon to know about that. And this happens all over the country. So when you go to these privatization deals, you're withdrawing data from the public record. There's just a new report out, by the way, in South Carolina, that the cost of the subsidies to big companies like Boeing, getting somewhere between $800 million and $1 billion to build the Dreamliners there, which have turned out to be unbelievably riddled with problems that have cost Boeing a fortune because the workforce doesn't have the skill of the old workforce in the Seattle area. It's costing enough money in these corporate giveaways to hire 6,600 more teachers in South Carolina. A poor state, desperate for better education system. These privatization deals and subsidy deals are cleaning your pocket. They're causing you to either have higher taxes, or, as shown in the case in South Carolina, this work was done by goodjobsfirst.org. goodjobsfirst.org have an excellent track record for the accuracy of their work and the reliability of it. 6,600 teachers in a small state like South Carolina. This is doing real damage. And the Trump administration is muscling big companies where they know they can use the power of the government to go after companies. So if Mark Zuckerberg doesn't knuckle under, if Jeff Bezos doesn't knuckle under, they're going to turn people loose on them from various places, from law enforcement to regulatory agencies to IRS audits. And people should be absolutely outraged about this. I don't understand why there aren't huge demonstrations in the streets. And as I point out in my DC Report piece, where are the religious leaders who should be in the forefront? Whether you're a pastor, a priest, a rabbi, or an imam, there are some speaking out. Don't misunderstand me. I just did the first podcast of something new called the Theological Talk Podcast. And I'm a non-believer, but they wanted to start with me to talk about moral issues. was one of the things we discussed, that far too few people who should be moral leaders are speaking up. Now, maybe it's going to take time for people to respond, but if you wait too long, it'll be gone. You won't
Well,
have
there
your
were-
liberties anymore.
Sadly, religious leaders have sometimes been very much in short supply when it comes to some pretty heinous acts that this
Yep.
that this country has done in the past and appears to be part of now. You've got, I was mentioning First Hour in the religious right, having signed on in so many ways, are rejoicing about taking control of Gaza. I mean, it's the one group that, in a world that wants nothing to do with this expressed Trump policy of taking ownership of Gaza. It's the one group that's cool with it because it does move them toward their end game. I mean, the true end times, actually. Now, I don't want to leave you
Ukraine.
without at least talking about Ukraine. Yeah, there's big news. Hegseth sees essentially redrawing the map and giving a lot of territory to Russia. Take us through where we are on Ukraine and your thoughts, please.
So let's go back to 1993 when the Soviet Union had already gone. Ukraine there were nuclear weapons in Ukraine. The Russians didn't want to have nuclear weapons in Ukraine that wouldn't be under their control, under the control of the Ukrainian military. So there was a treaty. The U.S. was very big in getting this treaty passed. Bill Clinton was president. That Russia promised, if you let us take all the nuclear weapons that are in Ukraine, we will never invade you. You have no worry about it. We'll never do it. Guess what? Donald Trump, who has had fortunes by his own account put into his pockets by Russians, who has had relationships with Russian oligarchs that make no sense. The land deal over the unbelievably grotesque mansion in Palm Beach, Florida. Palm Beach, Florida, where Rybolovlev tried to explain it away by saying, well, the reason that he paid Donald 3 times as much as needed for the property was he was hiding money from his wife. You're hiding money from your wife. You don't waste it paying 3 times what something's worth. And yet journalists just accepted that word. So now Donald has called Vladimir. They've had a conversation. Donald has said, we're now going to get this war settled. You notice he didn't have a conversation with Zelensky if you had any doubts about his pro-Russian perspective. And it's pretty clear from Hegseth's comments that they intend to force Ukraine to give up a large part of its territory, the Donbass and eastern Ukraine, and probably for the Ukrainians to withdraw from the area they've occupied around Kursk. Can you imagine a U.S. president who would relinquish any part of the United States of America? We're going to give up San Diego County to the Mexicans because their army has invaded. And the only way we can stop the killing in the war is we're going to have to give up San Diego. I mean, it's just not going to happen. By what Trump is now going to try to do with Putin is force Ukraine into surrendering here. And I don't care what promise Putin makes. It's clear that you cannot trust that they will honor their word. And which is kind of strange because in commercial transactions, when the Russians made deals with America, like the making of the biggest Hollywood movie ever made there, Peter the Great, or as they call him, Peter the First, the price of gold that was used in the contract, because I saw the actual contracts, to adjust the deal went against the Russians, but they paid off in full because when they were under the Communist Party, they couldn't be like filthy capitalists and try to wiggle out of the deal. They were honorable people and they took the loss. That's not Vladimir Putin by any stretch. And the signal will be taken from this by Xi in China, who is building islands in the South China Sea, whose government is complaining about U.S. Navy ships making freedom of the seas transits, where you go through an area to establish this is international waters, we have the right to be here, so does everybody else. His efforts to bring Tibet fully under the heel of the Chinese Communist Party. He's going to see this as, the Americans will back down. Maybe it's time to go take Taiwan. Now, you can make an argument for Taiwan being independent, founded by the fascist Chinese, led by the Kuomintang, criminal organization, or for it being independent. You can make an argument for independent or under China.
But we've pledged to protect it.
But by treaty, we're pledged to protect it. And is Donald Trump going to stand up to Xi if they try to invade? There's not a chance. Not a chance. So to any expansionist dictator, and that's effectively what Xi is, there are no real elections. It's a one-party state, just as with Putin. This is a signal. Go ahead, go push. And you're going to see actions by the Chinese. The shutting down of AID done illegally, no authority. People have already died and more are going to die. What are the Chinese doing right now? They're busy in Africa, where we've stopped with our aid program, trying to make friends in Africa. Hey, you know what? You don't want your particularly pernicious virus that's been corralled to a small piece of your population to spread, which it will if we stop providing drugs or condoms, the spread of HIV. Well, we'll give those to you, and all we want from you is water rights and land, so we can grow crops when China's climate change demands a need for more crops. We just want a license to get cobalt. And so, what did Trump do? By the way, he said, "Well, if the Ukrainians want our support, they're going to have to give us $500 billion worth of mineral rights in Ukraine." This is, Donald. This is about money and power. It has nothing to do with decency and liberty.
Zelensky, I think, knew that on some level, right, David? Because he even mentioned it, like he was trying to induce some support from America by offering up these precious minerals. Yeah,
and the Republicans always have marketed themselves as the party of freedom. They are not now. They are quislings, and they are the party of you will do it our way or else. In fact, a Associated Press reporter was barred from the White House yesterday because the AP has not adopted the Gulf of America.
Right. It's extraordinary.
They said, nope, it's the Gulf of Mexico, and there are two international bodies that make these decisions, and they haven't moved. But they barred. So, if you don't speak the language we want, if you don't say it the way we want, we will destroy you. Folks, you're right on the edge of a full-blown dictatorship. And if you want to have a dictatorship, that's your right. You can vote for a dictatorship. I don't think a lot of people who voted for Trump did. And if you're going to have a dictator, do you really want to have an ignorant, self-absorbed, narcissistic bully? Is that
who's turned the keys over to the richest man in the world, who doesn't care about any kind of balance of power, and he's surrounded by a constellation of others who also are committed to dismantling government and supporting the autocracy for their own ends. It's crazy, David. I've got to wrap up. I love our conversations. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks. Tuesday is our typical day. See you, David K. Johnston. Bravo,
hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.